Hey, this is Sharif here with another episode of the Golden Hour, joined by Dr. Kevin Majors. Kevin, great to be here with you again.
Hey, Shreve, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you bet. Well, Kevin, we talk a lot about growth and improvement, growth in our work, in our skills, in our relationships, in our bonds, and it seems to me that a natural part of growth, the path of progress, is failure. That from time to time, when you're trying to do something new and better, you don't succeed and you fail, and then with that can come frustration. So I thought it might be a good thing to help people understand better what frustration is and how to deal with it, why it comes along, and what we can do about it. So, what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's a very deep question. I think it's
Yeah,
relevant for everyone because who doesn't get frustrated from time to time?
exactly. Yeah, I do get frustrated from time to time. So I mean, maybe we just start with this the most basic question, which is, what is frustration? Is
Mhm.
frustration a kind of emotion? Is it a mindset? Is it a thoughts that we have repeated? Like, what is frustration in your view?
Well, I think I wish I had I wish that neuroscience had a perfect answer for what frustration is. I would say that it certainly doesn't seem to be an emotion, but yet it's something that you feel. So it's not an appetite. So it's not like you feel hunger or something or thirst, and so you feel this because appetites always have a natural end that satisfies them. Natural appetites. It doesn't seem to be an emotion because you can have emotions when you're, in a sense, not doing anything. If someone you love dies, you're going to, from time to time, feel sad about it. And it's like you just feel the sadness, but that doesn't. It's not like you're doing something, that's causing it. It seems like frustration only happens, in fact, when you're doing something, right? So it's that whatever you're doing isn't working. So it seems to me that when we're really seeking some particular end, an outcome, and have our heart set on the satisfaction that outcome would give us, if that satisfaction gets thwarted, then we get frustrated. So I would define frustration as thwarted satisfaction, but it's applying to activity. So it seems to me it's almost like a grinding of a gear that part of us is just wanting to try harder and get pushed through. And when you can't push through, then you get frustrated.
Right. So, yeah, could it be? I guess the emotions are typically responding to something external, like sadness or desire, and then with you. So you mentioned this frustration and satisfaction fit together in the master class. That's how you talk about it as well, that frustration and satisfaction are kind of, they fit together in some way. There you talk about them as left brain emotions, or something. I think, I'm not sure. So could it be that frustration and satisfaction are about maybe something more interior, more internal? So it's like your emotion, your perception, but geared towards internal things, whereas the other emotions are about external things. I'm just throwing out ideas here.
Yeah, I think that you can have emotions to anything you can perceive, whether it's internal or external. So it could be a thought you have that's totally unlikely to ever happen, but yet you get anxious from it. So there you have a thought making you anxious. In fact, every anxiety disorder is defined by what's the threat. If the threat is a memory, that's post-traumatic stress disorder. If the threat is an irrational thought, that's obsessive compulsive disorder, and so on. So you have to be perceiving it somehow, but it can be internal or external. And I think frustration can be about any outcome that you're seeking where you're really wanting that satisfaction and then it gets thwarted somehow. So I do think of frustration as the left brain's closest simile of an emotion. So it's as close as your left brain, your left hemisphere comes to an emotion, but it doesn't really have much content to it. And it's all about obtaining outcomes or not obtaining outcomes. For the right brain, you actually have much richer emotional life. And I think you have the whole spectrum of emotion in the right brain. And we know that when you are trying to feel an emotion itself, that is entirely something moderated through your right, medial prefrontal system. So it seems like right brain handles feeling true emotions. Probably if you're trying to feel frustration, it might be accompanied with emotions, but the frustration itself is something like, it's it's when you're trying to like just get something done, push through, and you get blocked.
In your mind, does frustration also typically anticipate giving up or despair?
I think it's different than despair. I think despair is an emotion, a genuine emotion, and that does, um, it's an urge to just give up, to throw in the towel. Well, frustration could lead to despair. So it could be that having one avenue of action blocked completely, then out of frustration, you actually despair. But the key about frustration is that it's just the flip side of relief or satisfaction. And all the emotions do, in a sense, want to be relieved. All the negative emotions, I should say. So there's something that whenever you experience anxiety or anger or even despair, these emotions are seeking, they're an appetite for a particular kind of relief. So it's very much like a natural appetite of hunger or thirst. But here it's like what they're seeking is whatever, I don't know, whatever you can say the object they're after. So that anger is really like an appetite for punishing someone. You have this urge to punish, to teach them a lesson. And if you're thwarted in that, you get frustrated. So you would feel then the anger kind of redound back on you more. So you experience emotions sometimes when they're frustrated. Perhaps you didn't know how much you were really craving that Krispy Kreme until you got there and they're closed. And then you're like, oh, and then you realize really how strong the desire was. But I would still think that these are, in fact, two different things. Uh, so, why that's important is because frustration teaches you an entirely different kind of lesson than what the emotions themselves are teaching you. The emotions are usually going to be speaking to something that you value and that makes sense that you would value it so much. Frustration speaks to something you are trying to accomplish that is outside of your control, especially when you're trying to control something you cannot control. You're setting yourself up for frustration. Now, sometimes you can exert some control and then you get really satisfied by doing that. But still, that just sets you up for more frustration.
Yeah, it's interesting as a programmer, frustration and satisfaction are very common. I guess we're not calling them emotions, but experiences of a program that you have this feature that you want to create. And then you're trying your approach, and then it just isn't quite working. And then you tweak something, and or there's a little bug that you can't exactly figure out why it's there. And so you're trying a bunch of different things, and they don't work. And so it just gets immensely frustrating. And then finally you solve it, and it's very satisfying. So we're saying that's not the ideal mode of working.
Oh, I think it is necessary that frustration and satisfaction happen. I don't think they can become the end. So if you're just working to get a sense of relief, from some kind of some nagging need of validation, some nagging need of some kind of level of achievement, and that's your only goal, or then that actually isn't even if you satisfy it and you end up getting the promotion, that satisfaction doesn't last long. So all satisfaction does wear away. It wears off eventually. So if you're seeking something because it satisfies you, you can be guaranteed that satisfaction cannot last. There is no neural mechanism involved that can give longevity to a sense of satisfaction that you have. So I think that what frustration shows us and the importance of it is, yeah, you don't want to be motivated purely by self satisfaction. That's one great lesson from it. But another is that it shows you that your strategy isn't working. And that highlights that frustration is always the result of the failure of a strategy. It might have been an implicit strategy. You didn't know you had a strategy. or but you were trying, there was some kind of problem you were trying to solve, and then you found you couldn't, you get frustrated. So you were using some kind of strategy that didn't work. So people are chronically frustrated. It really speaks to their fact that they are chronically reusing strategies that will not work. And so I know you could imagine someone always has to remind the other person they live with to take out the trash. And they're always frustrated that they always have to remind them. And but then they're always using the same strategy, of when they get annoyed enough, they say something in a nasty voice, and then it doesn't really work in the long run. Well, the strategy is what has to change. So, yeah, so I think that that is why frustration is potentially a real gold mine for growth, because it's an unmistakable signal. The grinding of the gears, the sense of you can't, and you're like, oh, wait a second. What am I really seeking here? I think that's a unique power that frustration has to get you to think intelligently about, wait, what am I seeking here? And what's the strategy I'm using? And is this the same one I keep using? Is that why I keep getting frustrated? I would say that I would bet that that's always the case.
Now, it can be very hard to do that because I think frustration is often accompanied by hyper focus, so that you're just so immersed in the task, or maybe your attention is so captured by the outcome that you desire, that all you can think about is, okay, I need to fix this problem. I need to solve this problem. I need to find this bug. And actually, when I'm doing that, I kind of find myself even so captured by it that I try this. It's not even trying the same. It is trying the same strategy, but trying the exact same thing, and then thinking it's
Mhm.
going to work differently, which I think is the definition of insanity, or maybe that's just a
That's a classic
popular
quote.
myth.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so,
It's not the
what
clinical
if?
definition of
Okay,
insanity, that's for
okay,
sure,
okay.
but no, it is a good point.
So how do you get had in the moment? How do you kind of break that hyper focus to have this level, like, sense of awareness? Oh, I'm frustrated. I'm trying the same strategy. What am I really seeking here?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that is the opportunity that frustration gives people. And just to stress that noticing you're frustrated can be the launch pad for a lot of very deep growth. I don't think anyone needs to feel frustrated. And most psychiatric disorders are characterized, the emotional ones, by what people call a low frustration tolerance. And sometimes I see people who say, yeah, oh, yeah, that's me. I just am like the kind of person who cannot tolerate frustration. But I think that that's kind of true of everyone, that I think that this is a universal experience. It's like a lot like an emotion. And it always means that we are doubling down on a failed strategy. And then we think that maybe trying harder or trying again will get us new results. So instead, we have to ask ourselves, one, what's the real challenge here? Like, what is the thing that because right now, my approach to this isn't giving me the results that I would want. And so am I trying to control something that I cannot control? Am I trying to control others, their behavior, their thoughts, their feelings? If you're trying to get other people to like you or to say good things about you and they're not doing it and you get frustrated, well, yeah, because you cannot control that. And there is no strategy that the world can give you that will then protect you from frustration if you're aiming at controlling these other people and their behavior, thoughts, and feelings. And even your own thoughts and feelings, you cannot control. Only your behavior you can control. So if you can relocate and find a way to challenge yourself to approach the situation that's troubling you with a new strategy, try to think through new options. Just to lay things out, right? Make a list of all the options you could be using to deal with whatever is bothering you. To be thinking through more deeply strategies that you've been overlooking, taking off the table. So I think there needs to be a widening of the person's vision to get out of the tunnel, to look in a broader sense. And this is what reframing is all about. So it's asking, okay, how can this situation somehow bring out the best in me? So that's because it opens frustration can actually open us to widening the horizons in a really unlimited way. Yeah, frustration is really like a window to wisdom. It's what allows us to transcend the dialectic of frustration satisfaction and just getting fixated on some outcome to like now rise above, hover above the situation so that we can see, okay, what is the real goal I should be pursuing? Which is the question that wisdom asks. We talked, last time about prudence, which is about means, and wisdom is about ends. And it's like is asking, what is the highest end right now? The highest goal I can set, and that's something in myself, my own growth, or something to help others.
And so, okay, how does this because now you mentioned two related things. One is wisdom, okay, thinking more about, okay, what am I really seeking? What's the highest goal I can have? Which is kind of like reframing, also sincerity. But then you've also talked about the strategy that the frustration comes about when you're retrying the same strategy. Now I think about the strategy as the means. So should the person be focusing on trying new means, like defining a new strategy, or a new end? So do you do one or the other, or both? Is it just okay? You need a completely new goal that you're seeking and a new strategy, and just start from scratch, or
I think that all that frustration points to is the failure of a strategy. But you have to then ask yourself, okay, did the strategy fail because I'm trying to control something I can't control? And that was like, of the six things, other people's thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and my behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. Of those, only my own behaviors can I actually strategize because that's the only thing I can control. So, in a good strategy, every step of the strategy is something you can do. So, and then, so, but that's why I think you do have to ask yourself this idea of like, what's my goal here? Am I trying to control something I can't control? And if so, how do I refocus it on something that I can? That way, it makes sure that you're not just setting yourself up for future frustration by still trying to control, make someone like you or make someone, I don't know, whatever it might be. And then you just keep trying new strategies for doing that. But that in the end can be very deeply frustrating. To keep trying new strategies when the end itself can't really is not in your control. I think it's kind of playing with fire. It's a dangerous thing. We can have hopes for others, but we never want to turn them into something we're strategizing and turn controlling them, especially into something we're strategizing. But even then, I would say the deeper frustrations don't really come from other people. I think that, the deeper frustrations come when we're trying to control our own thoughts and feelings because those are with us always potentially. So those can be very inescapable. If frustration really is thwarted satisfaction, or thwarted relief, well, if you're seeking relief from your own emotions, time and again, you're going to end up feeling thwarted very often. And that's the deepest frustration of all.
mhm. Yeah, okay. So this it's interesting because I think a lot of people see this as part of the personal growth, kind of self help approach, is that you're supposed to be growing and improving, and part of this is changing your emotions, changing your thoughts, like thinking positive thoughts, or having this, I mean, and even we talk about self mastery, gaining control over your emotions in some way. So now you're saying that's not a good goal. So can you
Yeah. We
distinguish
don't
for
actually
us this
speak about, yeah, we never talk about
from
gaining control of your emotions.
Okay. So what's the distinction there between
Yeah.
self-mastery as having a kind of mastery over your emotions, and what we're talking about here?
So if a person had the highest degree of self-mastery, he or she would be able to welcome any thought or feeling, and always have their actions guided by their highest ideals. So that would be the height of self mastery. It would actually be even in the midst of the biggest emotional activation, some big triggering, all of their behavior is just thoroughly leavened by their higher ideals. So I guess that would be above all things like would be love, that you can bring love into every action, and you're either aiming for, which is what's true love of self, which is your own growth, or true love of the other, which is some generous service to them. So I think when we talk about motives of, you know, growth and service, those are actually how you help people to be wise, which is choosing the right end, so that they're not choosing an end of self satisfaction. They're not trying to control things they can't control, but instead, they're seeking something that's actually good for themselves and for others. So that's what self mastery should allow people to attain. Now, that does that mean then that you could have the height of self mastery and still have a huge wave of anger or anxiety at any given moment? Yes, that's exactly what it means. Does it mean you're beset with frustration? No. The person with the highest self mastery would actually not experience frustration because he or she would only be trying to control what they can control and really never what they can't.
Now, okay, as you said that, you said, okay, they wouldn't feel frustration. I was thinking, wow, that's very appealing. That a Christmas, I got to develop self mastery so that I never experience frustration again. My guess is that aiming to not experience frustration itself would tend to produce frustration. Like that's not a good goal.
Yeah, if having no frustration is the goal, then you're going to get frustrated whenever you feel frustration. But the better you get at using frustration for real growth and real, like, resetting what you're aiming for, I think that you would progressively experience it with less and less intensity. Now, do you ever get to the point where there's none? Probably not. You know, but you would quickly recover. When you find yourself getting frustrated, you'd be able to like take a step back and like welcome the frustration, use it to reset what is really the best thing I can be aiming for right now. And then what's the best strategy I can use to get there. But you always want to do a check when you get frustrated. Not simply, am I using the best strategy right now, but am I pursuing the best end right now? Like, what's the goal that I'm after? If it's something that's reasonable, something that you can actually attain, great. Then come up with another strategy for attaining it. Many times in my practice, I am trying to help people to grow, right? I'm trying to help people. They come to me for lots of different reasons. And I've learned not to find, like, if they come back and there hasn't been progress or they're frustrated, I think I've been learning over the years to not experience frustration myself, but to immediately just bring in as much curiosity as I can to understand what's going on and then to try new ways of explaining things. So, and I think that that's true of any time, you know, we're you know in one of these situations where maybe like everyone's frustrated or they could potentially be. We need to be the person who is wise enough to just be welcoming that there is frustration and then trying to see how can the situation somehow bring out the best in us. Like, what's the deeper, the most wise thing we could be aiming for right now? I actually see that as long as people are welcoming what is and have this like non-judgmental awareness of it, is one of the things mindfulness is always talking about or how it's defined. I think that they tend to be on the right path. They tend to be like welcoming things, leads us to be wise. Whereas resisting experiences and trying to strenuously control them, that's just the path of frustration. So even if you can do it, I don't think it lasts. So there is something in it, where just welcoming the feelings you have, the thoughts you have, and the situation you're in right now always puts us on a very solid path of wisdom. So that it actually points out, I guess, how could we master ourselves? What's the best thing we can aim for? So more and more in my mind, I start to see welcoming and wisdom as just being more or less the same thing.
Well, yeah, I think that's a very interesting take, Kevin. And you actually answered my follow-up question, which was going to be, what's your biggest source of frustration? I think you answered that. I was going to get a little bit personal. Um, so, well, great. I think that last point is very interesting. So, learning how to welcome things is like true wisdom, and so what's the tie in there with so with frustration? Obviously, the more you're welcoming the situation that you find frustrating, that is kind of how you, one way at least, that you can overcome the frustration is that, okay, there's this difficulty and I'm totally fine with that, and that's okay. Okay. And then wisdom, on the other hand, also is seen as a cure for frustration, in the sense that you're seeking bigger things, whereas with frustration you were just seeking a particular outcome. So it seems like wisdom and welcoming are kind of approaching frustration from two different angles, but in some way it's the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that the true opposite of frustration isn't satisfaction. Instead it means transcending that whole dialectic of being satisfied or frustrated and then looking for the higher end. And that's what wisdom does. And somehow that same thing is attained then by being able to welcome whatever is. That another way of saying it is that there is something when we're welcoming experiences and we're welcoming particularly our own thoughts and feelings. That doesn't mean agreeing with them or giving in to them. That's what I think the mistake people often make. Like, how can I welcome a thought but without agreeing with it? No, you're welcoming actually the fact that you have this thought right now, that this thought comes and goes. But the more you hold the door open to welcome these things, the more the door is open for them to then leave also. But you can't be pushing them out the door and you can't be trying to bar the door. So the more you are welcoming things, it actually makes it easier for these negative experiences to leave also. And so the thought you don't want, the emotion you don't want, to the degree you welcome it, the faster it goes. So there is a sense also that when we are fighting like when we're struggling with our own thoughts and feelings and trying to control them, we've essentially turned them into enemies. I think the wise approach is to reestablish rapport with them. And it's like it does feel like befriending them, that you establish this kind of rapport again. So I think that's always possible for us to do, to not turn experiences and emotions, thoughts into the enemies we're fighting, but to welcome them. And usually then we see that there is a way in which they're good for us. They can bring out the best in us, and so that's the sense of like setting the real end we should pursue.
Yeah, and that relates to the episode on cheerfulness we had done a little while ago, of being open to your thoughts and emotions and welcoming them, being cheerful with those. So
Yeah. And I think that's how
wonderful,
we develop
Kevin.
this wise mind. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, Kevin, we're basically out of time, so I don't know if you have any final thoughts you want to leave us with, or a brief summary.
No, I think it's good that you note this thing of cheerfulness, because that always is one of the marks of true wisdom. When we are not trying to control things we can't control, and we get no frustration. Gradually, I think that we see that cheerfulness is what thrives then.
Hmm.
And we lose our cheerfulness so easily when we get frustrated. But then if we can put frustration to a good use, reset our aims and see, okay, how can this bring out the best in me? That's a solid path to being always cheerful as well.
Fantastic. Great. All right,
Yeah,
Kevin,
it's great.
thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll be back next week.